Hey everybody, what's up? Pastor Matt here. Thanks for checking into the YouTube channel. Today we're going to do a review of a Bible that is so awesome that, to be completely honest, you probably don't need to get it. It is very awesome. It is the Cambridge ESV Diadem, which is the enlarged Pitt Minion or the reduced wide margin Aquila, depending on your perspective. But I do want to simply say this. Look, this is an expensive Bible. It's over $200, and this is it's great. I love having one, and the reason I have one is because Cambridge sent this to me for free. You have your own financial priorities. I have mine. I don't know that I would spend $200 on a Bible necessarily, when in the same exact Bible is available for $25 in hardback. And not only that, but it's fairly comparable to your regular old ESV Crossway thin line edition. So why am I saying all this? Well, this channel used to start off as a Bible review channel. That's how I got so many subscribers. I'm over 21,000, I think, something like that right now. A lot of subscribers come here for my Bible review content. So I like to do Bible reviews every once in a while. But let's be honest, I'm not buying the Bibles that I'm reviewing on this channel from my own pocket. I've got kids in college, all right? I've got other financial priorities. You have your financial priorities. I'm only doing these reviews because I trust you with your own money. I wouldn't dare tell you what to spend and how to spend it. And there are reasons why you might want to buy a Bible that's, quite frankly, this awesome as the Cambridge Diadem. It's really an amazing Bible. Maybe you want this for your seminary Bible. Maybe you want this for your preaching Bible. It is graduation season. Maybe you're going to get this for a college student or somebody who's graduating seminary. So at over $200, it is a bit of an expensive, investment, yes. But hey, look, your phone is expensive and your golf clubs are expensive and whatever else you do with your own money, that's your deal. I just want to simply tell you this ahead of time, because what I'm really interested in this channel is the proclamation of the gospel. All right. I want everything I do to be about the gospel. So I'm going to throw this down for you before we even get into the review. If you're going to think about buying this Bible because you have free money for expenditures of whatever you want to do, some of you are collectors, some of you are Bible traders, you just love this kind of stuff. Let's remember that there are people all over the world that don't have Bibles. And I don't mean to lecture here a little bit, but I am a preacher. If you have so many Bibles and you're not giving them away, you're not giving out tracts, you're not sharing the gospel, why don't you buy this Bible and then go give a nice donation to Wycliffe Bible Translators or to Trinity Bible Society or whatever other nonprofit you think is great at sharing the gospel. Okay, so there's my speech out of the way. Let's get into this review of, yes, this fairly incredible Bible. This is the Cambridge ESV Diadem, which, as I mentioned, has exactly the same layout as the Pitt Minion and exactly the same layout as the Cambridge Aquila wide margin, which we're going to look at some comparative photos here in just a little bit. Now, before I get into this, look, I don't mean to brag, but I kind of called this. In fact, I called for this years ago when I started doing Bible reviews. My Pitt Minion and my wide margin Eagle were some of the first Bibles I really did reviews on. And I called for something like this, and I wasn't the only one. But I definitely said back in the day, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, that Cambridge should put out an edition, which it's the same as the wide margin, but cut off the margin so that people have a preaching size Bible or a reading size Bible. And so finally they did it. Whether you think of it as a bigger Pitt Minion or a wide margin without the wide margins, this is finally here, and it is quite awesome. I will tell you that right away. So let's go ahead and get into some of the details here. Let's look at the exterior here, the cover. This is sitting on the pulpit here. It's a pretty good image to show you the texture of the leather. This is a calf skin edition. It's not goat skin and it's not calf split. It has features of both, though. It's really beautiful. It doesn't quite have a lot of texture to it. If you look at the goat's or the calf skin here, it feels a little bit softer to me than the goat skin. You know, goat skin is really rugged, it's really durable, and it has that excellence to it. Whereas the calf split is a bit of a tougher hide to it. So the calf split also has a little bit more of a durability factor to it. This is probably going to be the gentlest of the three options between goat skin, calf split, and calf skin, which this one is. And you can see here that it's got Holy Bible, English Standard Version, and it has some ribs or hubs that are gently etched into the spine. They are not necessarily the protruding kind of ribs or hubs that you've seen in other premium Bibles. Excuse me for my throat issue here. So if we look at it from the other side, we can see a couple other features here. We do have art gilting along the edge. This would be the gold over top of like a light pink color, light pink or salmon. Looks very pretty, glistens in the light. And you can also see here that it has perimeter stitching, which is coming down and around the entire perimeter of the exterior cover. That's going to give it some lasting and very helpful durability to it. It comes with 3 ribbons. I'm not a big ribbon guy, but some of you like ribbons and you get upset if I don't mention what kind of ribbons it has. 3 red ribbons. They stick out just a couple of inches. In my opinion, they could be a little bit longer. I do like the fact that they're angle cut here. And as always, I do enjoy the Cambridge logo here on the bottom, especially given that Cambridge is the oldest Bible producer still extant in the world, going back all the way to 1591. Prior even to the King James version of 1611. So they were printing the Geneva Bible even back before the authorized King James. So that's just pretty cool. And one of the reasons why I like Cambridge. It does seem that Cambridge is listening to me a little bit lately, I should say. They did rename the Eagle. Used to be just the Cambridge wide margin. Then I started calling it the Eagle. Now they named it the Aquila, which means that somebody out there is listening. And now that they did this, which I've been calling for a while, hey, maybe it was me, maybe it was several of us together, maybe somebody there got the idea simultaneously as well. But either way, they finally did it, and now we have the diadem. So you open up the cover here, and we have a artificial polymer interior liner. And so if you have the wide margin, it's the same liner material as that. I thought this stuff was absolutely indestructible. But recently I've been using my my Eagle or my Aquila, and I have noticed that I'm starting to get some decomposition here. I don't know if you can see this tiny little corner of the screen over here, but check that out. It's a little decomposition right there. And check this out. I got a little piece kind of flecking off of my, you see that? Hold that up into the white spot of my screen. So it's not impervious to all pain, but nevertheless, a very tough interior polymer liner. And of course, this is an edge-lined edition right here. So you can see that running down. This is where the liner is tabbed onto the block. That means it's going to grip on there and it's going to hold tight for dear life. So no issues there. Now, when we have a look at the layout of this Bible, if you already have the pit minion or the wide margin, you know exactly what this is going to look like. But it's pretty cool nevertheless. So what do we have here? We have our 2-column paragraphed edition with a center column reference suite right between the 2 columns left and right. So this is why I love this Bible. And this is why I'm doing this review, even though I gave my little spiel at the beginning of the video, just to kind of convict and to motivate you perhaps. But I love this Bible because it has such a fantastic utility for those of us who are committed hardcore to using the wide margin. So I'm back using the Eagle or the Aquila again after a couple of year break from using it. But this is my main Bible, man. And I love this Bible. It's awesome. And it's so nice now to have a slightly larger pit minion sized, bigger than the pit minion, but a reader or a preaching Bible if you want to pair that up. And that's what's so cool about these is they actually pair so well. We're going to look at some comparative pictures together here in just a little bit. But if you know what the layout looks like of the one, you know the layout of the other, and you know the layout of the third because they're all exactly the same, which is so cool. I'm so thankful for that. It was really awesome. I have been using my Diadem as my bedtime reader, and it's so nice. I can hold this thing up. It's way lighter than the Aquila or the wide margin. And that just makes it so great. And it's bigger in its font and its layout than the pit minion. I distinctly remember a while back I was preaching from the pit minion at a particular event. There wasn't a lot of lights, and this is a couple of years ago, and I looked down at my pit minion and I said to myself, oh no, I'm in trouble because my eyes aren't changing with respect to being nearsighted. I can read small print really fine. If you have any medicine bottles you want me to read, I'm the guy for that. But light is a problem for me as my eyes age. And so I looked down at my Bible, I'm like, oh no, what am I going to do now? So it is nice to have the Diadem with a larger font than the pit minion does. but without the weight and the bulk of the Aquila or the Eagle. So we're going to look at that. I did want to mention just here also that while it's paragraphed, of course, in its narrative sections, it is also poetically set in the Psalms and other such places. So this is really, really beautiful of a layout. And here, of course, you get to see the salmon colored page edges underneath the gold gilding. So it is a pretty Bible. Let's just kind of zoom in here for just a second. Now, one of the complaints I have about this whole layout is how faint the verse numbers are. I think you can see this one right here. This is verse 31 of chapter 12. I love the big, bold chapter numbers, and I love the bold reference numbers in the center column. But hey, Cambridge, if you're listening to me, and now I'm starting to suspect that you are listening to me, why not bold up these verse numbers right here? See that? With the boldness of the verse reference numbers here. That would make it so much better for those of us who preach from these editions, so we can look down and see those verse numbers. Because as it is, and I'm going to show you a particularly egregious example here in just a second, sometimes the verse numbers can get a little bit confusing with the reference indicators as well as the footnote number. So I'm going to show you an example of that. But just for a moment, just marvel at how beautiful this layout is. If you like 2-column center reference Bibles, and you cannot get any better than the Diadem. It truly is stunning in its beauty. And I'll tell you a little bit about the paper here on this edition as well. This paper is awesome. Now, it's not as thick as the Aquila or the Eagle wide margin paper, because that's 38 GSM. That's made for writing in it. This Bible is not necessarily made for writing. It's made for reading or for preaching. So the paper is a 32, but that's going to be thicker than the 28 in the Pitt Minion. And so you have that sort of gradation in size as well as the thickness in the paper. So the Pitt Minion is 27, 28. The Diadem is 32, and then the wide margin is going to be 38 GSM. And that, again, has to do with the weight, essentially the thickness of the paper and how much pressure it can stand. I actually have some samples of writing here later in this video that I'll show you how well it holds up to writing in it. But my goodness, just marvel at that beautiful layout here for a moment. Now, let me show you an example of where the light verse numbers are a problem. And this happens all over the place, but this is a particularly egregious example. So you have your verse numbers, right? That would be like right here. Here's this number 2. Can you see this? This is verse number 2. And here's verse number 3. And here's verse 4 and verse 5. Okay, no problem. Well, when we see the cross references like this A and this B, well, then I can easily enough discern the difference between a letter and a number. The problem, though, is when we get to the footnotes that sometimes crop up here. So here we are, verse 1. There is no verse number indicator here because the chapter begins with chapter 5. We're reading along. Here we go. And then we get to 2. Okay, so that's verse 2, right? False. That is footnote number 2. And if I'm preaching or if I'm teaching with this, if I'm preaching or teaching with this, that is going to confuse me. And the fact that this particular passage has quite a few footnotes to it, this is a mess for a preacher. So check this out. We've got no verse number here. Here's 2, but that's not verse 2. It's footnote 2. Now we get to verse 2. Here it is. There's not a lot of difference between this one's a tiny bit bigger and this one's in italics. But is that enough? And then you get to 3, but is that verse 3? No, that's footnote 3. And then we have footnote 4, footnote 5, verse 3, verse 4, verse 5. Okay, so man, if you're trying to preach or teach and you come across this particular passage, and this is Romans 5, this is a pretty important text, right? It's kind of a little bit of a disaster the way that is laid out. What they should have done was bold the verse numbers just as bold as 5:10 is bolded right here. That's how bold verse 1, verse 2, verse 3, verse 4, and verse 5 should be. So Cambridge, if you're listening, I am officially calling out that the Aquila, the Pitt Minions, and the Diadems in subsequent editions would have bold verse numbers. And if you agree with me, hit me up in the comments or tag them on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. Let them know. Old Everhard is right again. He's right again, Cambridge. This is another change that we have to make for the improvement of these editions. All right. Now, speaking of the footnotes, it does have very helpful footnotes. And so here we are. Let's just move over here. And whenever the Bible does have a manuscript or variant related footnotes, they're usually put down here at the bottom right corner of the page. And just so you know, there are occasions where you have a passage like Romans 5, where there's so many cross-references that they do sometimes spill over to the bottom right as well. And when that happens, you'll have your cross-references at the bottom right here. Man, they're so beautiful. And then the footnotes will be above it right here. Either way, though, the cross-reference system is awesome. It's totally usable. And man, it's just fire to use this Bible, which is why I love my wide margin and why now I love my Diadem as well. All right. Now here's my eagle, my wide margin, my Aquila. And this is what I've been doing. So I'm back to preaching from my wide margin lately. That's this big, beautiful, famous Bible right here. That's so famous that it actually changed the name because I called it the Eagle. Now it's the Aquila. So what I've been doing is with my Pigma Micron pen, I've actually been bolding out my own verse numbers right here. That's not a problem because it indicates which verse I'm going to preach from. It's not a big deal to do this. It'll take forever to do all of them, but I usually do the ones that I'm about to preach from. And that's just a different way of maybe highlighting my Bible. Some people use highlighters. I'm not a huge highlighter guy, but I have been bolding my verse numbers, and I wouldn't be surprised if a few of you would start doing that too. Sometimes my ideas end up catching on. What do you know? But some of you will say, that looks kind of ugly, and I'm not sure that I would want to do that. Cool for you, cool for me. I do what I do, you do you, I'll be me. And so I've been bolding up my verse numbers for the sake of visibility. All right, let's go back to the Diadem for a moment. The Diadem does have some really nice, in the beginning of this Bible, it does have some nice fill out pages for you. It's got a nice new family record page, children page, marriages, grandchildren, deaths. I think you should actually fill these things out. Not a lot of people do that. A lot of people leave these blank. I think it's awesome. I think it's a great way to hand down a piece of family legacy to your children and to your grandchildren. So fill out those pages. No reason not to. Let me show you a little bit about the size of this particular Bible. I don't know if you noticed this right here. Can you see this on the screen? See that little white spot? It's worse in the picture than it is in real life. In fact, I can hardly even see it in real life. But that just goes to show you that this calf skin is a little bit softer because the goat skin wouldn't have done that. And the calf split would do that a little bit, but not quite so quickly. I've only had this Bible for a couple weeks. So I'm interested in using this Bible for months and years, and maybe we'll do some crash tests as we go. I really want to do a 10-year crash test on the Eagle and get back to doing some crash tests on the Pit Minion because these things are jacked by now. So that's pretty fun to do, I think, longitudinal reviews over time. Just for a size measure here, I want to put this up next to an ESV study Bible, and you're going to see how really handy this thing is to handle, to hold. It's a great Bible to hold in your hand. Perfect amount of floppiness. Some people in the Facebook groups have been worried that there's too much floppiness to the Diadem. I don't think that's so. And the reason it's not so is because the size and the dimensions are perfectly appropriate to the hand. I'm going to show you some illustrations of that here as we go. So you see the thickness there between this and your standard ESV study Bible. Let's go ahead and compare it to a regular old paperback, shall we? Who knows, maybe some product placement will jump in here again somehow. If Cambridge can use me as product placement, and by the way, they do give me these Bibles for free for my review, which is cool. Thank you, Cambridge, love you. I can throw in a little product placement of my own. Here's my new book, Jonathan Edwards, Holy Living, 70 Resolutions for Living the Christian Life. If you like Jonathan Edwards, get the paperback. It is out now on Amazon.com or any other place where good books are sold. Now, sorry about that. That was commercial, and I regret it. Just kidding, I don't. Let's look at it compared to the wide margin Aquila. You can see here that the footprint size is notably larger in the wide margin edition. And basically what that size difference reflects is the margins on the wide margin. The font is actually bigger on the Diadem, that's this one, than in the wide margin. And we'll show that here to you in just a little bit. But believe it or not, this margin here around all sides, yep, all sides. Can't so much see it on this side because the angle of the picture, but it's there. It does add quite a bit of heft and weight to the Aquila. making it a little bit unwieldy in the pulpit. And that's why I think a lot of preachers are really going to like the Diadem. So if they're taking notes in the wide margin, they're going to love preaching from this thing in the hand because it's so much lighter and nimbler when you're actually out there in the pulpit. And here's all three of them together. So we have here the Aquila, we have the Diadem, and we have the Pit Minion. Pit Minion's due for another crash test review. It's going to be awesome when I do. But you can see here the size difference respective in each one of these three. Step up, step down between these three. It's so cool having three editions of the same layout. Man, I just love it. I thrill that I can learn the exact same layout in all of my Bibles, and I know exactly where each passage is on the page. It's just brilliant. Every publisher should do this. Let's look at the Diadem compared sprawled out to the Aquila or the wide margin edition. You can see here that the wide margin lives up to its name. It's quite wide compared to the Diadem. And we'll throw on the Pit Minion for good measure as well. All turn to the same page. So you can see the differences therein. Now let's look at the font. I wish this picture was a little bit clearer. Sorry about that, but this is the Diadem. And so what we did here is the old $quarter test when we put a quarter on top of John 3:16. This is a way that you can kind of measure the font size if you don't have the technical tools and equipment to measure font size. So the $quarter test of the Diadem, the $quarter is going to fit over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines. 8 lines almost exact with a little space before we get to believe is condemned down here on this 9th line. So that's the Diadem. Now let's compare it to the Eagle or the Aquila. And you're going to notice here that the font is smaller because it covers more lines, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and a little bit of 9. Okay, so actually pretty close between these two. Let's go back. See the little bit of space there. And 4th, it does begin to cover up that 9th line. Okay, so there you go. Now, if you compare that to the Pit Minion, though, it covers up all of that line and some of the next. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines and into the space, just approaching the 11th line. So that gives you kind of an indication of how small the Pit Minion's font actually is. It is quite small. I don't recommend getting a Pit Minion unless you're less than 40 years old or you're as nearsighted as I am. Okay. Let's check these out in the hand just to look at the floppability here, the eagleization of these Bibles. This is the Diadem, fits perfectly. We got great curvature of the spine here. This is going to be a great Bible to preach and teach from. Looking at the Eagle, we see a lot more heft here and there for much more serious steep angles when you're holding the Bible in your hand. It is quite heavier. I should have measured it, but just trust me, this one's heavy to deal with. And then the Pit Minion is so small that you get just a little bit of flex in the hand right there. All right. Hey, check this out. We're going to look at some highlighters with respect to the Diadem, so you know what you're getting yourself into. The Diadem has 32 GSM paper, as I mentioned earlier. And that means it's going to be only so-so at best for taking those highlighters. So what I did here is I took 3 highlighters and I tested them. Hope you can see this on your screen because I can see it super clear on my screen. I used the Sharpie Highlighter, which is surprisingly good for the fact that it's a regular super bright highlighter. The mild liner, it's called here, is the middle one. And then I used the Pilot Friction Highlighter over here, which you have to remember, the Pilot Friction, because they're an erasable highlighter, they do disappear in the sunlight. I didn't think that was true, but it turns out to be true. It will actually disappear if you leave it out in the sunlight, okay? So I wanted to do a little bit of a test, and you can see that the Sharpie is the brightest. It looks like the Pilot Friction is the second, and that the mild liner lives up to its name of being mild. But this is a good picture, and I hope you can see this because the wrinkle factor here with the Pilot Friction is quite bad. This one, for whatever reason, made my Bible wrinkle up. The paper wrinkled up, and a little bit too with the mild liner, but not so much with the Sharpie. I don't know if that had to do with the individual highlighter, how much goober was it still in them, and how liquidy, how wet the nib was, or whether there's something of the chemical in the product itself that caused these two, but especially the pilot friction, to wrinkle up and not so much with the Sharpie. So let's go ahead and look at the back. And of course, these will be in reverse order because the page is flipped over. Here's the Sharpie highlighter. You can see it through, but it's not terrible. It's not terrible, especially if there was print on the other side. You wouldn't see it as much, but I do want you to notice that it does show through this 32 GSM paper. The mild liner, you can hardly see it, but you see a little bit of that wrinkling there. And then the pilot friction is quite light, which makes it a great highlighter, but the wrinkling there of the paper was the worst of the three. Again, I don't know whether it was the individual marker or whether it's something to do with the product as it's put onto the paper. I can't be sure about that. Finally, I want to take a look at how the 32 GSM paper holds up with certain writing implements. Some of my favorite writing implements. So I used a regular Bic ballpoint medium pen. That's not my favorite, but it's standard and you can find them everywhere. The Pentel pencil, a mechanical pencil, 0.7 size. Papermate gel 0.7, Pilot G2 in red. Okay, so colors may vary, so be careful about that. And then I checked out my Pigma Micron pens at a 03, 05, 03 bright blue, and a Pigma Micron 005. Okay, some pretty standard writing tools here. Let's flip it over and see what it does on the back. Just a superficial glance will tell you that the Pentel Quick Click 0.7 mechanical pencil fared the best in terms of the least amount of see-through, and the Pigma Micron 005 did the second best. Now, I don't know if you like using pencil in your Bible, but maybe this test suggests that 32 GSM here in the Diadem would probably be best if you're going to market it at all with a pencil. Some of these other ones did very, very poorly. This blue, what was this one? Let's go back. That was the Papermate gel, did terrible as there is both bleed through and show through. The Pilot G2 had quite a bit of show through, not as much bleed through. But this one right here, the blue Pigma Micron, fared surprisingly well. That was this one right here because of, look at the brightness on that. It's amazing. You got brightness right here, and then flip it over to the back. Not bad, not bad. So maybe that's the one to use. There is, I'm going to go back to this one more time. There is a Pigma Micron color that's like a reddish brown. I didn't show it in this test, but that's the one to me that has the best brightness versus least amount of show through. So if you can find the red brown color, that's pretty good bang for your buck as far as these archival pens go. And yes, this would be my standard tool for most of my Bible marking. 90 to 95% of all Bible marking is going to be done with a Pigma Micron pen. All right, well, that brings us to the end of our review. I hope you didn't mind my little sermonette there at the beginning. I certainly didn't mean to offend anybody. And of course, you can buy whatever you want with your own money. You're free to do so. It's a free country. I do just want people to think from time to time about how precious it is to have the Holy Bible. And, you know, I realize as more and more people follow my channel from all around the world, how we here in America are so stinking blessed. We're so blessed. So support your local church, be a good tithing member of your Bible believing church, but also think sometimes about giving to others around the world through things like Wycliffe or TBS or some other ministry that the sole job is to make sure Bibles get out there. Gideon's is another one. Think of those guys as well too. All right. Well, thank you so much for checking into my YouTube channel today. I will put some links in the description of this video. I will put some links into the $207 Diadem as well as to the $25 hardback edition. Don't forget, you can get this in hardback for 25 bucks. There are some differences though in the print quality, done by a different printer. This one is awesome. The other one, pretty good. All right. Anyways, love you lots. Thanks for checking in. Talk to you later.